had always dreaded family dinners. The oppressive weight of our family's history always seemed to hang in the air, and every gathering felt like a descent into a churning abyss of secrets and suppressed emotions. This particular evening, however, was destined to be unlike any other. It started like any ordinary family dinner. My parents, Elizabeth and Robert, had invited my younger sister, Emily, and her husband, Mark, over to our old Spanish-style house for a night of feasting and reminiscing. Our family had lived in that house for generations, and it held memories both sweet and sinister. As I prepared for their arrival, I couldn't help but recall the stories my grandmother used to tell about the house, tales of strange noises, creepy apparitions, and curses that had haunted our family for centuries. I had dismissed those stories as mere superstitions, but deep down, I couldn't deny the unease that always crept in when I set foot inside those creaky old walls. The evening began as we gathered around the dining table, the dimly lit room bathed in a soft, flickering glow from the antique chandelier above. The scent of roast chicken and mashed potatoes filled the air, and polite conversation danced around the room like a carefully choreographed ballet. But beneath the surface, I sensed something was amiss. As we dug into our meal, I noticed Emily's strained smile and Mark's nervous fidgeting. They had been happily married for years, but tonight, they seemed like strangers forced into an uncomfortable charade. My parents exchanged glances, their eyes betraying a hint of concern. I tried to steer the conversation away from the awkward silence by sharing a recent work success, but it was as if an invisible barrier kept us from connecting. Instead, Emily suddenly blurted out, "Have any of you ever noticed strange things happening in this house?" The question hung in the air like a ghostly whisper, freezing us in our seats. My parents exchanged a knowing glance, and a heavy silence settled over the room. Emily's words had unwittingly opened a Pandora's box of buried memories and long-forgotten horrors. My mother, Elizabeth, finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Yes, we have. But we never talked about it, for fear of awakening the past." The tension in the room was palpable as my father, Robert, began to recount the stories he had kept hidden from us for so long. He spoke of inexplicable shadows that danced along the walls, of footsteps echoing in empty corridors, and of the chilling feeling of being watched when no one else was around. The horrors he described were beyond anything I had ever imagined. As my parents' stories unfolded, Emily and Mark's discomfort gave way to sheer terror. Mark's knuckles turned white as he clutched his wine glass, and Emily's face grew ashen. They had unwittingly stepped into a world of supernatural horror, and there was no turning back. The old house seemed to come alive around us, as if it were responding to the tales of its own malevolence. The temperature dropped, and a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in, and we fumbled for our phones to use as makeshift flashlights. As the eerie silence persisted, we heard the faint, mournful sound of a piano coming from the parlor. None of us played the piano, and there was no logical explanation for the music that now filled the air. Goosebumps prickled my skin as we cautiously made our way towards the source of a haunting melody. The parlor was shrouded in shadows, but the moonlight streaming through the tattered curtains revealed an antique piano, its keys moving of their own accord. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, a melancholic tune that seemed to resonate with the very soul of the house. Emily gasped, her eyes fixed on an old family portrait hanging above the piano. In the portrait, a woman with strikingly familiar features stared back at us. It was our great-grandmother, Eleanor, who had died under mysterious circumstances in this very house many years ago. As the piano continued to play on its own, Emily whispered, "She's here. It's her. Eleanor." We were all frozen in place, unable to comprehend the supernatural force at play. Suddenly, Emily's voice cracked as she cried out, "She wants to tell us something." The room seemed to close in around us, the walls groaning with an otherworldly presence. The temperature plummeted further, and I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. My heart pounded, and I turned to see a spectral figure materializing before us. It was Eleanor, her ethereal form illuminated by the moonlight. Her ghostly eyes bore into us with a mix of sadness and urgency. She beckoned for us to follow as she drifted towards the rear of the house, her footsteps leaving no trace on the worn carpet. In a daze, we followed Eleanor through winding corridors and up a narrow staircase, her ghostly presence leading us deeper into the house's heart. We arrived at a hidden door that none of us had ever noticed before. Eleanor pointed to it, her spectral hand shaking with emotion. The door creaked open to reveal a hidden chamber, a room filled with ancient books, handwritten journals, and a collection of cryptic symbols etched into the walls. It was a room that had been sealed off for generations, concealing the dark secrets of our family's past. As we examined the room's contents, we uncovered the truth about Eleanor's death. She had been a gifted medium, attempting to communicate with the spirits that dwelled within the house. In doing so, she had unwittingly unleashed a malevolent force that had taken her life, leaving her trapped between worlds. Eleanor's message was clear: the curse that had plagued our family for generations could only be broken by confronting the vengeful spirits that haunted the house. She implored us to find a way to communicate with them and seek their forgiveness. With newfound determination, we delved into Eleanor's journals, learning the rituals and incantations she had used to communicate with the spirits. It was a risky endeavor, but we had no other choice if we wanted to free our family from the curse that had tormented us for so long. The ritual was conducted in the dead of night, the very heart of darkness when the supernatural forces were most active. We gathered in the parlor, where the piano had fallen silent, and began to recite the incantations Eleanor had left behind. The air grew thick with tension as we waited for a response from the other side. Suddenly, the room came alive with ghostly apparitions, tormented souls of those who had suffered within the house's walls. Their anguished wails filled the room, and their spectral forms swirled around us in a macabre dance. We pleaded for their forgiveness, acknowledging the pain and suffering our family had caused over the years. Tears streamed down our faces as we promised to break the cycle of cruelty that had bound us for generations. Slowly, the apparitions began to fade, their agonized cries turning into faint whispers of acceptance. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing that we had finally appeased the vengeful spirits that had plagued our family for centuries. As the last of the apparitions dissipated, a profound sense of peace washed over us. The oppressive weight that had always hung over the house began to lift, and for the first time in our lives, we felt a genuine connection as a family. In the days that followed, Emily and Mark decided to move away from the old house, seeking a fresh start. My parents and I chose to stay, determined to honor Eleanor's memory and ensure that the curse would never return. The house, once a place of dread and horror, slowly transformed into a symbol of resilience and redemption. We uncovered its rich history, restored its fading glory, and turned it into a welcoming haven for generations to come. And so, the dinner that had begun with fear and trepidation ended with a sense of closure and newfound unity. We had faced our darkest fears and emerged stronger, bound together by the shared experience of confronting the supernatural horrors that had haunted our family for so long. The ghosts of the past had finally been put to rest, and we could look towards the future with hope, knowing that our family's legacy had been forever changed.